Welcome to our presentation on claims management, a practical approach by the Motor Safety Association. The purpose of this presentation is to discuss the claims management and return to work process, as everybody has a role to play if we have an injured worker, such as the employer, the doctor, the WCB, and of course the injured worker, in getting back to work as soon as medically possible. So we'll go through the presentation and talk about some ideas that could assist in your claims management process, as well as the return to work program. We'll talk about appeals and give a brief summary at the end of our presentation. So we'll first start about definitions and run through some of the definitions when we're talking claims management. An accident is an undesirable event which results in an injury or damage to property. An incident or near miss is an unplanned event that did not result in an injury or illness or damage but had potential to do so. And when we focus on near misses, they are key in injury prevention. Dangerous occurrence is any occurrence that does not result in but could have resulted in a condition or circumstance that A, causes or may cause the death of a worker, or B, will require a worker to be admitted to a hospital as an inpatient for a period of 72 hours or more. And if you refer to the Saskatchewan Occupational Health and Safety Regulation number 9, it talks about what items would be listed, such as a bursting of a grinding wheel, an uncontrolled spill, escape of toxic or corrosive explosive substance, an explosive detonation, a failure of an elevated platform, the failure of a atmosphere supplying respirator, to name a few. So those are a few of the things that would be listed as a possibility of a dangerous occurrence. And always remember to report those to the Occupational Health and Safety Division within 24 hours. There is no specific form that you would utilize in this situation, so it is always best to forward in your investigation form with your corrective actions. Next, we speak to an injury. An injury is the results of a willful and intentional act not being the act of the worker. So if I pulled your chair out and you fell, so that's not the worker's fault, that is an unintentional act not being the fault of the worker. Or the results of a chance event occasioned by a physical or natural cause, that could be weather related. Or 3, a disabling or potentially disabling condition caused by an occupational disease, could be such as asbestos. And the 4th point, any disablement arising out of and in the course of employment. So that would be all of the rest of the possibilities of an injury that weren't mentioned in the previous 3 items listed above. Then we talk about modified work. Any changes in the duties that make up the job may involve physical changes to the work area, changes in the equipment used, or reorganization or elimination of duties or tasks, as well as modified hours. So these all play a critical process in our return to work program. So let's talk about the claims and some of the costs associated with the claims. The WCB premiums for the C61 subcodes decreased slightly, and C62 subcodes increased slightly for 2014. But unfortunately, the costs associated with these claims are still on the rise. So why are the increased costs? Well, we have increased in workers' wages. The more the workers are paid, the more premiums you pay to WCB, as your premiums are reported per $100 of reported payroll. So the increase in workers' wages attribute to larger payments in what you would pay to the WCB for premiums. And the increase in fees from healthcare practitioners. A few years ago was the very first year that the benefits that the WCB paid to injured workers was second to the amount that the WCB pays for the healthcare practitioners for treating injured workers. So those fees from the doctor as well as the healthcare practitioners have been on the incline and have been increasing steadily. So the more that they're getting paid is reflective in even higher than what the WCB is paying injured workers. So that's a number that's quite a concern. And the number and duration of claims. How many claims were they, and how long did they last? So those are on the increase as well that we have to manage. In this workshop, we'll give you some tips on how to do that. And ineffective claims management. If we're not managing our claims, we're not returning that person back to work, and we are looking at some surcharges possibly. And keep in mind, your compensation claims are not a cost of doing business. Sometimes when people receive their WCB statement, they pay it, they just think that's a cost of doing business, but you have control in who's on compensation and how much you utilize the compensation system. And keep in mind, you are grouped in the WCB with industries that have similar experiences as yourselves within subcodes. So for example, all the farm equipment dealers are grouped together, the body shops are grouped together, towing companies, tire dealers. So you're grouped in like businesses very similar to yours. So if what you do at your store has bearing on what happens for their premiums and likewise. So keep that in mind as well. That's why we like to work together as an industry to reduce our rates and our costs. There are a lot of hidden costs involved when we look at WCB premiums. I'm not sure if you've ever seen the iceberg slide, which shows beneath the water a huge chunk of ice, and then there's just the tip poking out of the water, which we can see. But what we can't see are the hidden costs. And when we look at that in case and claims management, hiring costs. If someone is off the job, we have to advertise to get a replacement worker. We have to conduct job interviews, orientations. That costs money. As well as the training costs. This new employee may have had training from a previous employer, but may have worked at a different location. So that training may be not required or may not be as what you need at your location. So you're going to have to train that new worker to get them trained onto what your training requirements are. What about rework? If you bring somebody in from another location and they may not have had that expertise and they turn into a situation where, say for example, they put the wrong pilot bearing into a tractor and that tractor needs to be split and redone, well, there's a huge rework cost involved with that. And that also ties into lost productivity. We have a person who's off the job and that bay is sitting open in that store. How much revenue isn't that generating in that location? As well as property damage. If there's a piece of equipment that is involved with property damage, say for example, we've got a forklift, so now that forklift has been damaged, and that's a good segue into the next example of equipment rental. We may have to rent a replacement piece of equipment. So all of these hidden costs are anywhere from 4 to 7 times higher what the actual direct cost is on your WCB statement. So when we look at those cost statements, factor in these hidden costs and times your direct costs anywhere from 4 to 7, and that will give you a true cost of what that claim is actually costing your location. So how does these claims look like when we are evaluating it for discounts and surcharges? Well, the WCB uses a system where they discount businesses for good claims management and they surcharge others for poor records. And they use a 3-year sliding scale or what's called an evaluation window. And I'll explain how that process works. Say for example, right now, if we are in the year 2013, the previous year is called the evaluation year, and that year isn't calculated in your 2013 premiums. However, your 2011 year is counted for 50% of your premiums, your 2010 is counted for 33%, and your 2009 is calculated at 17% in what's known as a weight-loss ratio. So a 3-year sliding scale is utilized for your previous years, and every time we advance further into the future, one of the earlier years drop off the scale. So for example, if we roll into 2014, the 2013 is your evaluation year, but what's calculated for for 2014 is what's happened in 2012, 2011, and 2010. So sometimes businesses will get a rebate from WCB, and they'll be quite pleased with that, which is great. But what happened is they may be in that evaluation year, and the previous few years to that, they've had some costs on their WCB statement. So sometimes it's hard to explain that we could be looking at a business that's going to be surcharged when they're currently in the rebate position. Once those years catch up to you, it takes 3 years to get off of that surcharge system and back into the rebate. So as that scale slides, we can move towards that discount position. So the WCB uses 2 programs for that calculation. The first one's called the standard program. That applies to employers with smaller businesses whose premiums are less than $15,000 combined in the 3-year period. And that qualifies you for a 25% discount or a 75% surcharge. Then there's the advanced program, where employers' premiums are in excess of $15,000 in that 3-year period as well. And they would qualify for a 30% discount as well as a 200% surcharge. So there is an opportunity for a discount as well as a surcharge based on your costs. So what does that look like on a calculator? So we've made an example for C61 businesses, such as our sales side of our rate code. And for 2014, their base premium is set at $1.34 per $100 reported payroll. So we've done a calculation with $1 million payroll, and the base industry rate would be $13,400. So if you are a new company starting out, or if you're happy to be paying the base rate, you'd be at $13,400 on that $1 million payroll. However, you have the opportunity to look at the discount. So if you haven't had if you've been claims free and if you had very little or no costs from WCB, you could be discounted on that $1 million payroll and would have to only pay $9,380 in reported payroll to WCB for premiums. Or if you were on the large side of the scale with a 200% surcharge, so if you had a lot of medical costs, healthcare practitioner fees, rehab costs, pensions, etc., you would be looking at that 200% surcharge and paying around $40,000, just over $40,000. And you could factor in for your own business, if you have a $4 million payroll, you could times each of these windows below by 4 to get the payroll reflection of your business. So you could do this calculation with your payroll and calculate it in there as well. C62 for our service side of the business, their rate's going to be $1.99 for 2014, and as we know, this presentation is being recorded, these rates will change over time, but this gives you a good visual example of what premiums can do based on this surcharge discount scale. So the industry rate of $19,900 for C62, discount would look like $13,930, and a 200% surcharge would be just under $60,000 on that $1 million payroll. So let's think about this. How many more pieces of equipment do I need to sell? More cars do I have to paint? More tires do I need to sell? Or looking at our lines of business, how much more revenue do I have to generate if I'm hurting workers and costing this much to WCB, where I could be on the discount side of it? That's a lot of revenue that's going out of your business. And then factor in your indirect costs, 4 to 7 times these numbers, and you'll really see that the claims management process is quite critical in preventing loss to your location. So I have an example slide here of, this is called the 16C1 form, and these are available from the WCB. They will be online. They have a system that you can set up an account, so you have access to all this information online. So that will be quite a benefit as well to you. So when we talk about how our rates are calculated, this picture might give you a good example of that. So this here took place on November 30th of 2012. So as mentioned, the rates are based on what happened in 2010, 2009, and 2008. So the year 2011 isn't reflected in this calculation for 2012. So the industry premium base rate, that's what locations have been set at by the WCB for the base rate. And then they have the opportunity of either discount or surcharge. So it looks like in 2010 this company received a discount in 11, and looks like a quarter surcharge in 2012. And that gives you your total premiums paid on the bottom. So you can see in 2012 our premiums have increased. So what this looks like is we took our base premium, our payroll, times that premium rate, and we factor in either our discount or surcharge to come up with what we are paying in premiums to WCB. So as you can see, in 2012, we're at $12,402. So how does that transpire from our costs? So our costs, this are our medical aid numbers. This is what the WCB has paid our healthcare practitioners and doctors for treating our injured workers. So as you can see, the numbers have been increasing. In 08 it started at 1,200, it's doubled in 09, 2010 9,000, 2011 70,000, but 2012 we're down to $142. So that's great, but unfortunately, as mentioned, what happens with our previous year's experience, with the exception of the bad years in 10 and 11, the employer will be paying in the future for these costs. So right now in 2012, he did get a surcharge from what happened in 2010, but what's going to happen in 2013, there's going to be a bigger surcharge just based on these total number of costs that have accumulated. So in 2013, this business will have received a larger surcharge. And then there's the compensation side of it. That's what the WCB has paid the injured worker for wage replacement. So look what happened in 2010 and 2011, $8,000, and then 5 times that number in 2011. So that's huge. And then look at our costs. This is the total costs essentially. So 17,000 and 114,000. And as a rule of thumb, when your cost number exceeds your premium number, you're going to be paying some money back to WCB for utilizing their claims or for utilizing their program for their wage replacement. So this is actually a company, we usually says the name on here, but we've removed that for the sake of confidentiality. This is a company we worked with in 2012 with claims management. So we were able to work with this company, and look what's happened since we've worked with them. Their medical aid costs have dropped. Look at this, from just about $71,000 to $142. They haven't used any compensation. So if they had an injured worker, which looks like, by the looks of their claims, they did not. So they brought those numbers down. So look quite a difference, from over $114,500 to $142. So and reducing their claims to 0. So that's a success story, and hopefully they can continue down that path. But unfortunately in 2013 and potentially years after that, they could be looking at paying some surcharges to WCB. So that's a little bit about how that calculation works. So as an employer, what can we control? Well, obviously, prevention is the main mandate. If we can prevent that injury, we can prevent that claim, we don't have to manage it, we don't have the cost associated with that claim. So just think of that. If we don't have that injury, look at what that's going to save us in indirect and direct costs. It's huge. There's also the CORE program, Certificate of Recognition. That's a standard of safety excellence, which it means that you have a safety program that passes a CORE audit based on our audit tool, which looks for documentation, observation, and interview. So if you've passed a CORE audit, that could be a form of prevention if you have a safety management system that's functioning. MSA also has a competent safety leader designation, and that allows businesses to have a safety champion per their location, or as many people that they want to have the safety leader designation. So that means is they've successfully completed a series of courses, either through the MSA or through a industry partner or an equivalency who offers the safety courses we require for this designation, and they've submitted to us their certificates as well as any of the other documents that we are requiring. We do have more information on our website if you want to receive that designation. There's also ergonomic assessments, fitting the jobs to the worker. So if we can make that job and worker match so that we are working together so they're eliminating the potential of a shoulder or back injury, that's going to bring our costs down. There's the opportunities for near-miss reporting. Some businesses, what they did was they encouraged near-miss reporting, and they would put the people's names in for a free lunch raffle or some sort of recognition that they are reporting near misses. So if we can report a near miss, investigate it, and control it before it turns into an injury, that is going to help us in the claims management process. There's also various online safety training courses that you can take, which will help better you with your initiatives for prevention. And inspections are key. If you have a functioning inspection program where you're proactively going through your workplace, each person's inspecting their area, you may have an outside facility or business come in and inspect your location, so that's going to help identify potential causes of injury as well. And then what employers can control duration. If in fact we do have someone that's hurt, let's get that person back to work as soon as medically possible. Let's get them in to help fill out the investigation form. Now let's do some modified duties and to complete their W-1 forms. So let's bring those duration costs down through an effective return to work plan and our claims management. And you want to have a safety culture that's supported by management. So if management is supporting what you are doing in your claims management and your safety program, and they are walking the talk and talking the walk, where they would participate in leading by example, you would be successful in preventing your injuries and having a safety culture that embraces health and safety. So let's jump into the return to work program. Research indicates the longer the duration of a claim, the less likely the injured worker will be to return to work. So after 50% of workers will not return after a 6-month absence. After a 1-year absence, only 20% of workers will return. And after 2 years of absence, 10% will only return. So this is a large problem. So if claims aren't managed and we allow claims to go in that excess of time, we're not going to get those workers back. And most of the industries that we've spoken to, the people are always looking for workers. They're looking to expand their workforce. So if we have workers off for long periods of time and they don't come back, well, all that investment we initially put into bringing that worker to our workplace is gone, and we have to start over again. So what are some frequently asked questions we'll talk about? What is a return to work program, a return to work plan, and are we required to have a return to work program? Do our employees have to take part in the program? And how do I convince my doctor it is safe for the worker to return back to work? These are things that we will talk about throughout the rest of this presentation. First and foremost, you need commitment by senior management to support your return to work program. And this comes right back to day one when we hire a worker, and during the orientation we explain to them we have a return to work program. It is your responsibility to participate in that return to work program. So people need to know from day one that they're obligated and it is their responsibility to participate in the return to work program. Do you have a return to work policy from senior management? Is it signed? And is it posted in your facility? This demonstrates commitment from management. So what is our objective? Well, we want to bring that person back to work And we want to look at continuous improvement. If we had a lot of claims in the past, maybe we can make a goal that's measurable to bring those claim costs down. And Mission Zero is always a great goal to have in our claims management process. We want to review our objectives and measurements regularly to determine that they're being met. And as our program matures, we look to the past and to our claims to see that our return to work program is being met for measurement and being successful. So there are a lot of people involved in this process for claims management. For example, management needs to ensure that resources are available. They need to be committed to claims management. They should elect a return to work coordinator and ensure participation of all parties in the claims management process. The return to work coordinator needs to establish a return to work program, a list of alternative or modified duties, have return to work packages, and be able to report to management. The supervisor needs to ensure timely reporting, the investigations are being completed, and monitor the employee's specific plan to ensure that the limitations are within that worker's capabilities. The injured worker has to report their injury in a timely fashion, obtain a return to work package, speak with and work with the return to work coordinator, and participate in the investigation and take part in the return to work program. The affected coworker is someone who is on the sidelines. They're watching this injured worker and they're working with them and encouraging them to cooperate with the return to work program and stay in with the plan. And the healthcare provider needs to provide capabilities of what this injured worker can do so a return to work program or plan can be generated. So when should the planning start and where? Well, with the return to work committee if you're in a larger business, or a return to work coordinator. So if you do have a committee, it's good to have representation from different departments in your business. And your coordinator could be one person as well who would look after this return to work program. So what about a procedure? Well, we need to have a planning meeting. So this would take place after the worker is injured and we get them back to work the next day, him or her, to participate. So we'll have them back for their next scheduled shift. They will be involved in this procedure. They will have their capabilities form completed from their healthcare practitioner, and then a list of modified duties with alternative work options can be prepared and submitted to WCB. And sometimes that can be a challenge. What kind of alternative work options are there? And we sometimes beg the question, for example, if we say John is injured and we talk to the service manager, what can John do? He might say, geez, I'm not sure. He can't do his regular duty, so he's not much good here. Well, that's the wrong answer. Sometimes we rephrase that question and say, I'm thinking of bringing in a summer student. Are there any odd jobs or tasks you need help with? And it's amazing the response we get. We get responses such as, yes, I could use some help. We've got to do an inventory count. We need to make some customer calls. We need a lot of housekeeping. We've got to sort the bulk bin. We've got some different items we need to locate. All those small jobs that we've been pushing off in our location, now we have an opportunity to complete. Also, training is great for an alternative work options. So what about a job information worksheet, also referred to as a JIW? This provides a detailed description for the attending physician, and it helps the physician determine what accurate restrictions or capabilities the injured worker would have, and it provides opportunity to develop modified duties. So they use these JIWs to assess the capabilities in the return to work plan. So it is usually the best practice to fill this out in advance, and this will save you about 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks in time loss. Because what happens is if you have a claim and then after a few weeks the WCB will contact you and say, let's get a JIW completed so that we can see what this injured worker's capabilities are. So if you have one of those in your filing cabinet ready to go, this will help the doctor determine what the injured worker's capabilities are. And I would start with, say for example, in a business, let's maybe start with doing a JIW for our service department, our parts department, sales department, and administration department. So let's look at some of those areas with the higher risks first and complete those JIWs so that they are ready to go. It's always good to not fill those out yourself. Get involvement from the workers. Get them to prepare a JIW. Then you can compile that information and have a completed JIW readily available. They are 6 pages long. This is what the sample page, the front page of a JIW looks like. We do have those on our website, as well as the WCB has those on their website as well. So after that has happened and the injured worker is back to the work and we've determined what their capabilities are and we have our JIWs completed, let's get this worker involved in the investigation. We're looking to find out what happened, why it happened, and prevent it from happening again to someone else. If you haven't taken an investigation course, on our website we have the link to the WorkSafe Saskatchewan's investigation course, as well as other investigation courses that you would find beneficial. So who is involved in the investigation process? I would involve the injured worker. They know what happened, so they can be a part of it, and it's an excellent modified duty. His or her direct supervisor or manager, and a committee member. It's always good to have at least 3 people on the investigation team so that we can reach a decision. And remember, of course, to move away from blame and address the root cause. We're not here to blame somebody. We're trying to find the root cause and prevent this from happening to somebody else in the future. If you'd ever watched the show CSI, we're looking for details, details, details. So do what they do. Have a camera, a tape measure, paper and pencil, all the information that you could require when you're collecting information to have an investigation. So something you can start on right today is have an investigation kit and have those items in it. So if an incident arises, you can grab that kit and go with it. Also on our website, we have a webinar that speaks to investigations and gives a lot of tips and tricks as well that could help you. So we are looking to determine the root cause, and a lot of times this can be determined by asking why 6 times. So if an incident happened, we'll say, why did that happen? We'll get an answer. Then we'll ask why. And we'll ask why again and again till we can't ask why any longer, and that is usually our root cause. Sometimes there is a single cause, or in a lot of cases there are multiple causes or factors that led to that undesirable outcome. So those are things that we want to look at. So once we determine our root cause, what is a short-term fix or control? What's something we can do today? And what's a long-term solution or control that we may have to budget for to eliminate that problem? So those are things that we want to identify after our investigation and once our root causes have been determined. Now that we've determined that information, let's talk about how do we fill out the E1 form as an employer, and when do we fill it out? As an employer, you need to fill that form out or complete it to WCB within 5 days of awareness of the injury, and that includes long weekends and stat holidays. So if the injury happened on Friday and you were aware of it, and Friday passed, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and then we get back to work Tuesday, well, we're just about at the end of our 5 days of awareness, so we need to get that claim into WCB as soon as possible. Sometimes employers will wait until they have payroll information to submit their claim. That can always be submitted later, so don't let that delay of information on not having your payroll hold you up in your submitting your claim to WCB. So this is, in fact, what an E1 form looks like. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes just talking about some specific areas that need to be looked at closely in submitting a claim. For example, number 4, area of body injured. Be very specific. Was this the If someone's finger was injured, put left hand, index finger, knuckle. Be very specific. And a good example of that is a business we were working with had a shoulder injury. It was their right shoulder. So they submitted their claim into WCB. The worker was participating in physiotherapy, and at that time had injured his left shoulder. So he was still off on a shoulder claim, but because of the way they filled out their E1 form, with it still being a shoulder claim, the claim had to continue because the employer, when they filled this form out, didn't specify right shoulder. So be very sure to be as specific as you can when filling out area of body injured. How did the injury happen? The very first words I would write are 4 words. The employee states that, and then put in the description of what happened. By doing that, you're not admitting to anything. You are basically, if you were to go to an appeal, you're able to get this information safely, and you're not basically admitting anything as well. And number 10, do you have any reason to believe this is not a work-related incident? So if yes, if you believe that's the case, check yes, and put explanation of why you feel that is the way you do. If you put no, if you have any reason to believe this is not a work-related incident, and if you check this off, and if you check it off incorrectly and you ever were to go into an appeal process, it won't really help you much if you didn't fill in that you had any suspicion that this was not a work-related incident. So those are a few tips on how to fill out the E1. So how do we get it to WCB? Our recommendation is to pick up the telephone and call the WCB. This will save you 3 days of time loss and costs, because what happens is if you submit that claim by fax, it goes into the WCB and then it gets sent to the right person and then it gets processed. And all that time is costing money because this claim is sitting outstanding until it gets processed. And if you do it online, sometimes people think that might be the most instantaneous way it's done. Well, what happens is when you do it online, you get a reference number and not a claim number, opposed to when you pick up the telephone and phone them, you end up with a actual claim number. So that's the reason why you would phone in, to get an actual claim number. And if you are in no rush whatsoever, you could mail that into WCB. But our recommendation is to pick up the phone and phone in, as it'll save you 3 days in time loss costs. So do you need help filling out those forms? You could contact us or the WCB. Where does the claim go? Well, once it goes into WCB, it'll be processed and a letter will be at the end of the claim number. Once it is assigned a claim number, it will either be a level 1, which is an A, level 2, a B or C, or level 3, which is a D. And those are all basically ranked on risk or the severity of the injury. So level 1 claims are very specific medical aid injuries. A level 2 could be a specific incident, straightforward, and it could be a claim that is expected to last 4 weeks or less. So those would be the level, those claims for level 2, which would be a B and a C claim. And then level 3, which would be your D claim, high risk, which is usually non-specific. It could be a chronic problem, such as a back injury, and it usually takes the WCB about 28 days to make a decision if that claim will be accepted. So what does this look like in the mapping process? Well, first of all, we submit that report, that injury, to WCB. Our recommendation is to telefile, but you could e-file, fax, or mail it. You want to maintain your communication with the injured worker, the WCB, and the doctor, and follow up to make sure everyone is involved in the process. Next, you want to track that claim. Once that claim is into WCB, you want to track it to ensure that it's being managed, because WCB looks at the claim initially, then they won't look at it again for, I believe, about 4 weeks. So there's a bit of a lapse in time till that claim is actually reviewed again. And you want to work with the WCB and establish your return to work plan with your injured worker, submit it to the WCB as soon as possible, and update them if there's been a change in the worker's capabilities and if you have to change your plan. So as mentioned, the WCB looks at your claim after the 4-week period, or they look at it initially when it comes in, again at 4 weeks, and again at 12 weeks. So that's a lot of time that lapses between when they're actually looking at your claim. And as you've seen by the costs on one of the earlier slides I showed with how the rates are calculated, the more costs you have, the more you're going to pay in premiums. People think that the WCB has your claim on the top of their desk and they're watching it and monitoring it every day and following up. Well, that's simply not the case. There's so many claims that come in and they are reviewed at WCB at set intervals. So it is up to you, the employer, to monitor those claims. The WCB is an insurance program and they're providing this insurance for claims management. But this is a very similar process as if you were to get into an accident with your vehicle. So let's play that example. So if you were to get into an accident, you would call, for example, perhaps the police, a tow truck to pick up your vehicle. Then you're going to have to source a rental car, have that your towed vehicle go to the auto body shop of your choice, and you're going to follow up with that body shop. When is my car ready? How much longer is it going to be? Checking with SGI to see what they give you for repair costs, if it's a write-off. So it's a whole process that needs to be looked at. So that's the exact same as case management and claims management. So when a claim comes in, it needs to be reviewed and followed up on. If you're in a car accident, you're not just going to call the tow truck and walk away from it and hope your car gets fixed and finds its way back to you. So why would we think any differently for claims management if we have an injured worker? The same amount of follow-up needs to be applied as the same we would if we wrecked our car as if we hurt somebody. So the return to work forms, a good practice is to have a package ready to go. And in that package would have the E1 and W1 forms to complete, witness or investigation statements, investigation reports, and to keep that information available to have in there the capability form so the practitioner can complete that form when the injured worker goes to the hospital to determine what this injured worker's capabilities are. So that's right when you want that form completed, and that allows the injured worker to bring that form back to work. A lot of businesses pay the healthcare practitioner a fee, 50, 75, whatever the number is, dollars, in addition for the doctor to complete that capabilities form. And that really helps in getting the worker back to work through having your return to work program or plan, because if we don't know what their capabilities are, how do we generate that plan? So it's so critical to have that form filled out. So let's talk a little bit about graduated return to work program. So that's if your injured worker doesn't quite have all of his or her capabilities back, but we are using the WCB for perhaps a wage top-off. So the worker's coming in to work for 2 hours a day, WCB's topping him or her off for the rest of their pay, and so forth. So you can pick the duration if you choose to do that. My caution is, though, if you do use the WCB for wage replacement, the more you use, the more it costs. So it's up to you how much you do wish to use that program. There's also an interjurisdictional agreement, and this is an agreement between the Prairie provinces where the WCB agrees to compensate visiting workers if they're injured away from their home province. The injured worker can get compensation in either the province where the injury happened or sign a release form to opt for coverage from their home province instead. So you need to set up an account with the neighboring province's WCB if you have workers that are out of province for 5 consecutive days on work business or 3 trips per year. then you have to register your WCB. Then you have to register with the neighboring WCB. Some other additional information is WCB will pay for permanent accommodations. So if a worker is disabled and we need to install wheelchair ramps or lower their counter heights or make permanent accommodations, those costs could be reflected onto your WCB statement as well as to help in permanently accommodating that worker. So let's finish up the presentation and talk a bit about appeals. So if we have a worker that is injured, there's a potential that this could lead to an appeal. But keep in mind, no injury equals no claim equals no appeal. So if we don't injure that worker, we don't have to worry about the appeal. So when you submit your claim to WCB, they will decide if the claim is accepted or not. So remember those tips I told you about filling the E1 out? So you want to fill those out accurately. And what happens if the WCB accepts that claim? And if you don't agree, well, there's always the opportunity to appeal. So there are three different types of appeals. There's an employer appeal, where an employer can appeal any decision related to an injury claim. So for example, the employer can appeal that injury happened at work. So if they were at a Sunday night hockey game and they seen the worker took off the hockey ice, the rink ice on a stretcher, and that person comes to work Monday morning and has an unwitnessed back injury, there's potential that the employer could appeal. There's also a worker appeal, where a worker can appeal perhaps their modified duties that you assign to them. And there's an industry association appeal, where an industry association can appeal their classification. So for example, the C61 rate is lower than the C62 rate, and there has been an occasion where an industry has tried to appeal their classification to get a different rate. There is no timeline or limit on appeals. So if you have a claim that happened 10 years ago and you have valid documentation for an appeal, you can submit that appeal to WCB. But before you do that, you want to contact the WCB rep who made the decision, ask for their explanation, and offer any additional information you might have, because that's an opportunity. Maybe it can be resolved right at this stage, and by having that discussion, this could be an opportunity to resolve this claim. So at that point, if you're not satisfied, you can still proceed with your appeal process. You can go to our website and submit and look under our Forms of Publications menu to get the appeal form, or you can contact the WCB. WCB will then contact the worker and advise them the employer is requesting a copy of their file. So it's going to take about 6 to 8 weeks until you get your information from the WCB, because the injured worker has the first chance to review this information in his file, and there's an opportunity that he or she could have information removed before it goes to you. Well, what kind of information? Say, for example, if there's medical information that may not be relevant to the claim, perhaps if there's stress medications or different medical condition information that wouldn't be relevant or specific to the claim that the employee wants the employer to have access to, the employer would have 21 days to object and have that information removed from his or her file. So in the event the employer does not have the time or resources to complete the appeal, they could appoint a representative and they could conduct the appeal on their behalf. And they would submit the appeal in writing. They could submit it by fax or mail and include a description of what the issue was, why the decision was incorrect, and what they're hoping to have as a result of the appeal. So we looked at the categories, but there are some appealable issues, such as the claim acceptance. The employer believes the injury did not occur at their workplace, and they're questioning why that claim was even accepted. They can appeal under relationship. The employer disagrees a condition is a result of the injury. So for example, the injury was a broken arm and the medical condition is a soft tissue injury to the shoulder or in the upper arm. So that may be something that could be appealed and claimed. There's the fitness to return to work. The employer feels the injured worker is ready to return to work, but their injured worker disagrees. So that's an opportunity to appeal. And then there's the cost relief, and there's 3 sections under that. What if there's a pre-existing condition? An employer can appeal the cost in excess of normal recovery time because of a pre-existing condition. Then there's the second injury. An employer can appeal the cost if the injury is from a prior work condition. Or an administrative error. The employer can appeal the cost of a claim that is due to administrative error. So what if that claim didn't even happen at your workplace and the WCB accidentally put someone else's claim under your records? So it is an administrative error, so you want to take a close look so that you're not paying for somebody else's claim. And I want to talk a bit about the pre-existing condition. There was an example of that where a worker fell off of a ladder at a business, and the doctor says, I believe this worker should be back to work in about 4 weeks based on the nature of his injury, his or her injury. And 6 weeks later, this person wasn't back to work. So the patient had an MRI, and it was determined that they had degenerative bone disease. And the employer felt that something's not right with this claim. Based on the mechanism of injury and what happened, this injured worker should have been back to work. So they submitted an appeal, and once they got the information, they were seeing that an MRI had occurred and that degenerative bone disease was discovered. So they submitted an appeal for cost relief, pre-existing condition, and they based it on the normal recovery time. So if the doctor felt that this injured worker returned to work in 4 weeks, so any of the costs after 4 weeks, they appealed for, and they were successful. So just keep that in mind. There are opportunities, and there has been success stories for appeals in the workplace. So that summarizes our claims management program. So keep in mind, a fully functioning return to work program can save you tens of thousands of dollars, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars to the bottom line of your company. The question really is, if your company can afford to implement a return to work program, it's can you afford not to? And a lot of times throughout the presentation, we've focused on the financial side of this. How much money did this cost? How much money will this cost? We want to also think about our injured workers that are involved. We want to do our due diligence and act in our best interest and theirs in preventing their workplace injuries so they can go home safely, because it's ultimately that's what our goal is, to prevent injuries in the workplace. So with that concludes our presentation on claims management. If you have any questions, feel free to phone us at one of the numbers listed on the screen or refer to our website for more information. Thank you.